Hello, you're with Business Live from BBC News with Ben Thompson and Sally Bundock.
Russia confirms that a terrorist attack was responsible for bringing down the Russian airline over Egypt last month. And as world leaders look at how best to respond to those attacks in Paris, we'll assess the ever-growing financial impact of terrorist attacks.
Live from London, that's our top story on Tuesday the 17th of November.
Bringing down the Russian airline over Egypt.
$53 billion, that's what analysts say terrorism cost the global economy last year. But what of 2015, as Russian authorities confirm a passenger jet was downed by a bomb only weeks ago? We speak to the think tank who warns the economic consequences of Europe's worst terror attacks in a decade will reverberate across the region. Also in the programme, EasyJet soars to new heights with a bumper set of results. The airline's pre-tax profits of over $1 billion for the 12 months to October. So what and where next for the no-frills giant? Its shares are still going down in London. But across the board in Europe, you can see strong gains as these markets bounce back strongly after the nervous start of trading week Monday following those events in Paris on Friday.
And building the arenas for great sporting moments, the man behind some of the world's most iconic stadia, including the London and Sydney Olympic sites,
for the
will join us later in the programme. And as always, let us know what you think of the stories that we're covering today.
But across the board in Europe, you can see
debate.
strong
Use the
gains
BBC
as these markets
Biz
bounce back strongly after A very warm welcome to the programme. So in the last 15 minutes, Russian authorities have confirmed that a terrorist attack was responsible for a Russian plane crash in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, that claimed the lives of all of those on board, 224 people. It's the first successful terror attack on a passenger jet. In the last 15 minutes, Russian authorities have confirmed that only a matter of weeks before the deadly attacks on the streets of a Russian plane crash in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, that claimed the lives now saying that all of those on board terrorism has reached an all-time high. It's the first successful terror attack on a passenger jet 15 minutes ago. Authorities have confirmed that only a matter of think tank suggests deadly attacks on terrorism around the Russian reached almost $53 billion last year. That all of those on board terrorism has reached an all-time high. It's the first successful terror attack significantly ago. Where are the majority of think tanks suggest deadly attacks on terrorism around the Russian reached almost $53 billion last year. That all of those on board terrorism has reached an all-time high. It's the first successful terror attack significantly ago. Where are the majority of think tanks suggest deadly attacks on terrorism around the
Just talk us through how you
It's the first successful terror attack significantly As an organisation, you look into these events, the cost of these events, the consequences of them. Of course, we've had this confirmation literally in the last half an hour about the Russian plane crash being a terrorist act, the situation in Paris. Global leaders have been gathered. We've had the G20, we've got the APEC summit underway now in Manila as well. They are all talking, they are all together at this time. What are you expecting in terms of response?
I think you're going to start to get much more concerted efforts. I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis placed on trying to get Syria sorted out, particularly a common approach to the Assad regime. At the moment, very, very difficult to be able to actually get an effective response to ISIL unless you can get regional response and an international response which is coordinated.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. We appreciate you coming in. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Steve,
for talking us through your research. Very poignant at this time, of course, as well.
Just to bring you up to date with that news, as Sally touched on there, that we've been hearing in the last few minutes, that is Russia's security agency, the FSB, saying that traces of explosives that were found in that debris of the Russian airliner that was downed over Egypt. That was on the 31st of October. They say explosives were found and therefore that was terrorism. President Putin has ordered special services to focus on finding those responsible, it says, for that terrorist act.
The head of the FSB actually is quoted saying one can say unambiguously that it was a terror act. That's the very latest on that situation. We'll keep you up to date, of course, throughout the programme here on the BBC. Let's just fill you in now on a few other business stories, starting with BHP Billiton and Vale, the two mining companies. They've been fined a further $260 million for the mining disaster that killed 11 people in Brazil earlier this month. The mining giants already been ordered to pay $65 million after a dam burst at their jointly owned Samarco mine on the 5th of November. 12 people are still missing following the incident in southern Brazil that set off deadly mudslides.
And Australia's Qantas Airways has regained its investment grade rating after Standard & Poor's recognised the airline's improved balance sheet. Qantas has implemented a massive cost-cutting plan and in August revealed its best results in 7 years. Let's take you to the Business Live page because lots of information coming in too, and I just want to stay on that airline theme and also that issue of security, because you'll remember that many of the airlines around the world have been bringing back passengers who were stranded in Egypt as a result of that terrorist attack that's been confirmed this morning. EasyJet, one of the airlines here in the UK that was caught up in all of that, the chief executive Caroline McCall has been talking this morning about the number of people they have working in Sharm and also, of course, now in Paris. She says they're keeping an eye on the security situation.
Welcome, you're watching Paris Tax News Live.
Indeed, she was. I was talking to her earlier actually because she pointed out they are the number 2 airline to France. Paris is an enormous destination for EasyJet. They have 1,000 employees in France.
If you have any problem when you're watching this channel,
airline stocks have been impacted
please make a
by
comment.
the reaction on the part of investors in terms of their
Please
thoughts
make a
about
comment.
the fact that
Thank
travel
you.
will be affected, certainly in the short term. She did agree with that in the short term people's travel plans are affected by these events, but she does feel that the travel of those who want to go around Europe, etc., will return quite soon afterwards. So interesting to speak to Caroline McCall earlier.
Also details on the live page too of that mega merger in the hotel industry. You may have seen that headline already. Marriott buying Starwood Hotels, making it the world's biggest hotel
1.1 million hotel rooms now they have.
Yeah,
that
no
one
organisation.
organisation. Right. As we've mentioned, world leaders are gathered at various events. US President Obama is in Manila with several other leaders. That's the capital of the Philippines. They are holding the annual APEC summit there this time. It's the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation.
Yeah, proceedings officially start tomorrow. It is the first time that these leaders have all been together since they agreed on that major trade deal that we talked about here on the programme. It was the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Well, Leisha Chi is in Singapore. She's got the details for us. Leisha, good to see you. Just talk us through what we're expecting out of this summit, because, as we said, the first time they've met since TPP.
Exactly, but in light of the Paris attacks, I think it's fair to say that the focus at APEC now will be on countering the global terrorism threat as well as stepping up regional security. So around 20 countries are being represented in Manila, including, as you said, US President Obama. And he's expected to discuss the situation in Syria on the sidelines of some of his meetings there in the capital of the Philippines. But there's also the very sensitive topic of regional tensions over disputed territory in the South China Sea. The US today said that they provide about $260 million for its allies to increase their maritime security. But otherwise, the summit is mostly expected to center on trade and the economy, as well as that mega trade deal, the TPP. And this all has to do with boosting growth. And they want to achieve this not just through trade, but increased infrastructure spending and economic cooperation. So aside from the TPP, we also have the upcoming ASEAN Economic Community, where we'll see a single market across Southeast Asia.
Good to see you. So let's look at the numbers now so you have a sense of how the day went in Asia. Strong gains across the board. So Japan up at the close 1.2%. Hong Kong, that's the night before on Wall Street, which always helps sentiment. So a real strong bounce back for markets globally. Let's look at Europe, where it would seem that there's fading concerns about the geopolitical impact of what happened in Paris on Friday. As you can see, look at France behind us at 1.2%, and it was flat at the close yesterday on Monday. So overall, the markets are bouncing higher. Individual stocks are having a tough time. EasyJet shares down again today. We'll talk some more about EasyJet in a minute. But first, let's look ahead to the US. It's a big day there for information that could affect the Federal Reserve. Neda Tawfik has more.
When Walmart reports third quarter earnings, they're expected to be down from last year. And the world's largest retailer has warned investors that sales will be less than had been hoped this year, and that growth could be affected for a few years due to spending on higher wages, staff training, and its e-commerce program. The company is facing increasingly tough competition, so investors will want to see how Walmart fares against other retailers this holiday season. Home Depot will also report earnings. The home improvement company likely got a boost from the recovering housing market. And in economic releases, after 2 straight months of declines, U.S. consumer prices are forecast to have risen in October. Could that mean inflation is on course to eventually reach the Fed's target of 2%?
Neda there in New York for us. Anne Richards is with us now. She's Chief Investment Officer at Aberdeen Asset Management.
Nice to see you, Anne.
Welcome to the programme. Let's start with, or keeping with the US theme, because we've got inflation figures from the US later today, also here in the UK, and it's that lack of inflation that's the issue, isn't it?
It's really strange that we're this late in a cycle and we don't have any evidence at all that inflation has built up anywhere pretty much around the world, and that's what gives the policymakers such a dilemma at this point in time, because normally it's quite an easy one: raise interest rates as inflation is rising.
That's the issue with headline inflation, isn't it? But if you take out the energy side of it, you take away the slump in petrol prices in the US, some individual areas like housing prices, goods, services are going up, aren't they?
So goods in general you aren't seeing much in the way of inflation in terms of goods. In terms of some services, you're seeing a little bit of pressure build up there. But even in the round, even taking all of that together, core inflation is still running at or below trend in every major economy. So it's really not the place you would expect to be in this late in a cycle.
Okay, and we're going to keep it brief because we've got a lot of news coming in, of course, related to that Russian plane crash. But you'll be back with us to talk us through the papers a little later. But for now, thanks.
Still to come, we'll be speaking to the man who designed London's iconic Olympic Stadium.
Yeah, Rod Sheard, the founder and principal architect at Populous, will be here with us to discuss what makes a great sporting arena and why it makes sense to keep building new ones.
Now let's tell you more about EasyJet. So the actual figures: the 5th consecutive year of record profits, boosted by what the airline said were favourable economic and consumer trends.
Yeah, profits for the year, though, rose by 18% to £686 million. Well, our business editor Kamal Ahmed has the details. He's in the business newsroom. Kamal, just bring us up to date.
Well, yes, EasyJet profits today seen as being very strong, the 5th straight year of record profits. These figures were closed before the events in Egypt and the events in Paris, so no effect of those as yet. Low oil prices, high demand from passengers, particularly from the UK because of the slightly weaker euro, have certainly helped EasyJet's numbers today. Caroline McCall spoke to the BBC earlier, and she did reveal, though, the effects of both Paris and Egypt on the business.
They are important markets to us. Egypt, Sharm is a very popular winter sun destination for Swiss and British people in particular. But it is still a very small part of our network, actually. So if you're looking at it financially and only financially, you would say that, it's below 0.5% of our network. That doesn't mean it's not important. It is important to us, but actually the effect on our overall full year numbers will be, it won't be material. So, but Paris is a much different thing. I think that is much more about enhanced security across Europe at airports. And I think, as I said before, passengers will understand that, they will welcome that, and I think they'll feel very reassured by that.
So although passengers are up and profits are up for EasyJet, security concerns are weighing on the company. Let's have a quick look at the share price this morning. You can see down 2%. If you look back over the last 3 months, a big fall here, which was the Sharm el Sheikh issue, passengers trapped in Egypt, and a fall here. So despite good numbers, investors still concerned about the security implications of what's been happening in Paris and in North Africa.
Thank you so much, Kamal Ahmed, our business editor, bringing us the lowdown on EasyJet. You've spotted another interesting story.
Yeah, great story here in the Times this morning. Lidl, the German retailer, is to sponsor the English Football Association and the Scottish Football Association. So those rivalries live on, but nonetheless a commercial tie-up between the two.
You're watching Business Live. We're just bringing you the latest on what's happening with regards to Russia. The security chief there is saying a terror act brought down the Russian plane in Egypt, killing all 224 people who were on board.
Yeah, the head of Russia's Federal Security Service says that signs of a foreign-made explosive have been found in the debris, victims' remains and personal effects. Now, in response to that, President Putin has promised to step up efforts to combat ISIS in Syria. This news, of course, coming just 4 days after gun and bomb attacks in Paris that killed 129 people.
So there's a lot more detail on all of that on our website. Do keep up to date that way.
Now, in other news, when it comes to the great sporting events, the lucky ones get to see it firsthand in the stadia and the sporting venues, and the roar of the crowd and the excitement in the air. That's when the venues become more than structures of steel and glass. They become somewhere where sporting history is made.
But what goes on when it comes to making them? Well, on a very basic level, they let the public watch the sporting event, of course, whatever that may be, and the financial rewards can also be huge.
Yeah, just from match days alone, Arsenal's football club's revenues have almost tripled to $152 million in a year since they built their new stadium back in 2006. But of course, building a huge stadium like that, well, it doesn't come cheap.
For the New York Yankees, it cost a massive $1.5 billion and seats around 50,000 for fans of the baseball match. The firm behind both of those projects is the global architects Populous. They also designed the athletics arena for both London and Sydney Olympics.
Well, the man at Populous who designed both of those stadiums is the architectural sporting guru Rod Sheard. He's the only person to have designed 2 Olympic stadiums in the modern era. Rod is with us now. Very nice to see you.
Welcome to the programme.
We talked there about what goes into coming up with these structures. Just where do you even start? Just take it right back to the beginning for us, and you get a brief, I guess, from an association that says, look, this is what we want. What do you consider?
Well, I mean, in the past, briefs were often about numbers. You know, we want to go from 40,000 to 60,000 or whatever it might be. And that's still an important part of it. Capacity is always important, but it's you guys, it's television that's really, and the internet that's changed the world. So in some ways, it's the image that you project to the world which is as important as the atmosphere in the bowl. If you don't get the atmosphere in the bowl right, then the image on television, on the internet's not going to be the same either. So almost the focus these days is to create that atmosphere, whatever that number has got to be. But if you can create an amazing feeling in the bowl, it somehow comes down that internet line and makes it real for the people at home.
And we're just looking at the amazing arena now at the Olympic Park in London that obviously was done in the nick of time for the 2012 Olympics. I mean, I would imagine the pressure is great. You've been through it twice in terms of an Olympic event?
Yeah. I mean, both of them were competitions that we won, really. And at the end of the day, the Olympics is one of those events that they always leave it slightly to the last minute. You never have a great amount of time to do it. So you're always having to kind of go at breakneck speed to start on site. I mean, London was absolutely crazy. We were actually starting doing things on site before we'd finished the drawings in the office. But you have to because of the time. And the reality is world sport is like that. Every 4 years is a Olympics of
Does
whatever.
that affect the design itself? You have to come up with a design that's you can erect quickly?
Look, it's not so much erecting it quickly, but these buildings just get more and more complicated. There's more and more stakeholders involved, and you've got to listen to everybody. You've got to take into account what they want. And sports change in priority. I mean, you know, Usain Bolt running down the 100 meters was a key event. And you've got to give that priority. What was amazing about the Olympics in London, which I think has changed the format for Olympics forever, is the Paralympics were so massively successful. You know, it was wonderful to see.
And what are the risks of getting it wrong? We've all seen these Olympic venues where the stadia are just white elephants. They sat there rusting as soon as the games have finished. They don't have any legacy. Clearly that must be worked into your plans about reuse and being able to put these stadiums to another use after the Olympics have gone. But also making sure that it is a viable venue that can cope with perhaps smaller capacities.
Fundamentally. I mean, you know, look, the days are gone where you could just build a big Olympic stadium for ego reasons. And just let it sit there and then desperately try and find something to do with it afterwards. And I think, again, London was a bit of a watershed in that sense, in that they set about, Seb Coe and his team really set about finding venues that if they didn't have a long-term use, then they got taken down, and many of the ones at Olympic Park have gone now. We also went out of our way to use existing venues. So you used London, like the Horse Guards Parade and the volleyball, and that really created an atmosphere that was special to London. But you don't need that sort of a venue, so you just use it as a temporary venue and take it away. And you know, we've just finished our transformation of the Olympic Stadium, which is now ready. It went and saw some rugby there recently, and it's ready for West Ham. So that sort of reusability is absolutely fundamental, because as your intro said, it's all about money. It's not just about getting numbers of seats, it's how much money will this new stadium make us.
Really interesting to talk to you, Rod. Thanks very much. Rod
So many more questions, but not enough time.
Exactly.
We appeal for more. Thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Now, in a moment, we're going to take you through the business pages. First, though, let's go to Manila, which, as you've been hearing from Leisha earlier, is hosting the latest APEC summit. Rico Hizon, who is from Manila, is there for us and gives us a taste of what's ahead.
Manila, a place with huge potential, but it has its setbacks. Even getting to work each day here can be a chore.
This is a reality every day we face. It takes us at least 2.5 hours on an average to get from one point to another.
And time is money. No one knows that more than Jerome Ong, who runs a meat processing company. His plants churn out more than 5,000 hot dogs every minute. But profits are being squeezed.
Expensive transport costs brought about by port congestion and the very busy roads that hampers our efficiency and brings up our cost of distribution.
We'll have more from Rico. Hopefully you'll join us live tomorrow from the APEC Summit.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at what the business pages have been looking at. Anne Richards is back with us. She's Chief Investment Officer at Aberdeen Asset Management. Anne, welcome back. Let's start with this story. I touched on it a little earlier, and this is about the mega merger in the hotel industry. Some staggering figures to talk about here, not least the number of hotel rooms that they will control.
It's huge, isn't it? This will be more than 1 million hotel rooms. It's over 5,000 properties right around the world. And I think what you can see happening here is the desire of the hotel companies to spread not just geographically but at different price points, different bits of the market. So it's international, but it's also going for the youth traveller, going for the older, more mature, perhaps more better off traveller, pulling together a whole bunch of different brands. They're going to have something like 30 brands across this combined portfolio.
So just to clarify, it's Marriott buying Starwood. It's a $12 billion deal, $12.2 billion deal, I believe. Interesting, we were talking about this earlier. The colleagues, most viewpoints in the studio was the most important thing in the hotel is?
I'd say the comfy bed.
That's exactly what they said.
Yeah.
Comfy bed, number
the
one.
The mattress.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the other thing is think about the overall environment. I mean, rooms that flash and buzz, An awful lot of rooms have an awful lot of lights in them now, and that's very irritating.
I've had a few funny experiences where I can't figure out how to get the electricity on. Because you have to find that little slot for your key. And I get into all
That's
sorts
quite
of
a
trouble.
basic premise, but nonetheless.
But anyway,
the branding
I can't charge
issue is,
anything. It's a real problem.
I think the branding issue is one that's so important, and in the hotel industry, much like many parts of the travel industry, it's one of those issues that is so important when it comes to who they can pick. Effectively, it's a room with a bed and maybe a restaurant downstairs, but the issue here is all about having the brand, a different brand that it targets different customers.
It targets different customers. I think the other part of this is that when people are exploring different countries, if you can give them something in a different country that is familiar to them. So if you know you're going to stay in a Sheraton, you've always stayed in a Sheraton, then you'll have a degree of comfort about going to a new country because there's something familiar there.
And thanks very much. Really nice to see you. Thanks for talking us through those papers.
And that is Business Live for another day. Do join us again tomorrow. Just to reiterate the top story though today.
Yeah, within the last half hour, the head of Russia's FSB security service says the crash of the passenger plane in Egypt was the result of a terrorist attack. They're telling us Vladimir Putin now vowing to make sure that anyone responsible is caught for the death of 224 people at the end of October.
Hello there. Our first named storm of the season, Abigail, impacted the UK last week, and now we're looking at the second named storm. This is Barney, which is on its way across